Our calling is not to be a fan. And Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, he said this. He says, then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. We're called to be disciples. We're called to be followers of Jesus. So I want to look at two different traits of fans and followers. And first, fans criticize. And have you noticed that when you're watching and you're following a team and maybe, you're like that Buffalo Bills fan and you were like, what, I thought this was going to be the year, and fans, and you look and you saw some things happen on the field, you're like, what happened? You start, criticizing, and it's easy to be criticized. Have you heard the term Monday morning quarterback? For those of you that don't know football, might not understand the analogy, what it is saying, Monday morning, it's easy to sit back and say, oh, they should have done that. They should have ran this play on the one. What were they trying to do? Throw it on the 1 yard line. They should have ran the ball. It's called being a Monday morning quarterback, where you have all the information ahead of time, and you're just sitting back and looking. I'm like, oh, they should have did that. And I'm guilty. I sit back, what are they doing? I was watching hockey last night, and honestly, the Leafs played awful. They didn't deserve to win. I was like, this is bad. They're just getting outplayed. Their goalie, luckily, standing on his head for them, and I'm sitting there, what are you doing? Why are you making those plays? I'm scratching my head. I'm like, what is wrong with this team? And I actually went to bed. It was they were down 3-2, and with 6 minutes left, and I'm like, honestly, they're playing awful, so it's not even like they have a chance. So I'm like, I'm just going to go to bed. And I went to bed, and sure enough, I got an alert on my phone. I looked over to see what the score was, and they tied it with under a minute left. And I'm like, man, and I'm like, should I get up? I'm watch. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm just gonna, go back to bed, and I'll see the score. I didn't want to be in a bad mood, so I'm like, I'm just gonna go to bed. And sure enough, I woke up and they ended up winning it. But it's easy to be the Monday morning quarterback and look back and kind of, criticize what, others do. And being critical is part of, is a sign that you are just a fan. And Jesus he had both fans and he had followers. And the religious rulers, believe it or not, they were once fans of Jesus. And I want to take you to Luke chapter 2, verse 46. And this is when Jesus was just a young boy. And the religious rulers were actually a fan of Jesus at this time. It says, after 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Verse 47, it says, everyone. All that were there, the religious rulers, the Pharisees, everyone who heard him talking about Jesus was amazed at his understanding and his answers. The religious teachers and rulers of the day that ended up killing Jesus and crucifying were once fans of his. They were amazed at his understanding. They were amazed at Jesus' answers as such a young boy. They were a fan of Jesus. Jesus was just a boy, and he was already gaining followers. If Instagram was available back then, Jesus would have been on his way to being an influencer. He'd be on his way to 10,000, 20,000, 50, 100,000, million followers, and he'd be this influencer. Everyone was a fan of Jesus. But fans don't last forever. Fans don't last forever. Have you heard the term fair weather fan? I'll be honest, there's a lot of sports teams that I'm just a fair weather fan. If they're doing good, yeah, I'll tune in and watch. If they're not, I won't even watch. It's a fair weather fan. See, religious rulers, they changed their mind about Jesus when they started seeing how he was living his life. They didn't like the kind of the trajectory that Jesus was starting to live his life. And we read in Mark chapter 3, verses 1-2, it says, Jesus was older, he was in his ministry at this time. It says, another time, Jesus went to the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they were already watching. They were already critical of Jesus and what he was doing, how he was living. And it says, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. The religious rulers, they didn't like how Jesus was challenging what they believed was sacred, and they didn't like how he was really turning things upside down on them. So, because the religious rulers, they had elevated themselves to this position of power over the people. And the religious rulers, they didn't want to lose this power. And Jesus was kind of turning this all upside down on them. See, it wasn't just Jesus breaking the law that upset them. They saw the writing on the wall. They didn't want to lose their position of power and prominence over people that they were never really supposed to have in the first place. Their hearts weren't in the right place. See, fans will often criticize what's going on, right? Criticize a manager's moves, like, oh, why did you trade him? What were you thinking? That makes no sense. And you sit back, and it's easy to criticize. The religious rulers were looking at Jesus, they're criticizing him, just waiting for him to slip up so they could do something that would they be able to arrest him and ultimately crucify him. So we have to ask ourselves, do I have a critical spirit? Critical towards the things of God, critical towards others.